Dr. Holmes, thank you for your lovely introduction. I'm grateful to Dr. Kroll for her inspiring me to be a discussant today. Rory Rothman and I have had a wonderful time. We started collaborating on a project in interviewing archivists for the Spotnitz archives. The estate of Spotnitz bequeathed Spotnitz's papers to the center, and they're being archived. And later in my presentation at the end, I found something in the archives which I took, which I will present to you. This is a premiere, a first performance of that little piece of paper that I found. We have just been treated to a piece of first-rate modern psychoanalytic research and a superb illustration of how a modern analyst works in integrating research and treatment. I like the compelling language Rory Rothman uses to describe her observations of the patients she works with and the frame through which she observes them. I like how she uses all parts of herself and brings them to bear in her clinical work and her research. Her observations were, excuse me. Her observations didn't help, did it? Her observations were informed by her theoretical knowledge, enriched by keen awareness of her emotional and sensory responses to the patients, and by her capacity to summon up visual metaphors for understanding them. This is not accidental. She was trained as a visual artist. She writes, for example, "I tend to understand my patients visually and viscerally. I picture their inner life in terms of energy blocked off and try to allow an image or association to come to mind, which helps me to create some understanding." She adds observations. "I find it notable that in many of these patients there is an absence of prominent observable symptoms. It reminds me of the idea of negative space in art. You know, negative space in art is everything that surrounds the focus of attention, and we usually we don't regard it, and that is what happens with these patients. I noted some special challenges in working with them, where extra emphasis is placed on a combination of sensorial and vigilant listening. Rory Rothman's work has made me think of the role the analyst's creativity plays when doing research and treatment. For example, she discovered a new way of listening to this particular category of patients that she describes as sensorial and vigilant listening, a far cry from Freud's immediately having attention. She has brought to her research and clinical work the drive to know and understand, plus sensitivity, imagination, and the ability to make links. These elements imbue every aspect of the process, much in the same way as they would in any creative work, whether artistic or scientific. I find this both inspiring and liberating, bearing in mind that to work with this kind of freedom is only possible when we are as sure-footed as we can be in walking rocky clinical terrain, and when we also possess a strong foundation in theory and technique, and of critical importance, have good supervision. This is essential in working with primitive patients, as Spotnitz well knew from experience. And there is his experience. You know, he was in treatment. His analyst was Lillian Delger Powers, who was at New York Psychoanalytic while he was training there. And she had had 2 years of analysis with Freud. She may have had other analysts. And then subsequently, she was in supervision with Ferenczi here in New York. This is information that Dr. Murray Sherman brought to my attention. So Spotnitz said, or wrote, "When I began to treat schizophrenic patients, I was in personal analysis. This was a fortunate coincidence because I was totally unprepared for the weird feelings they induced. When I described them to my analyst, Lillian Delger Powers, she asked, 'Why are you so afraid to feel psychotic for a few minutes?' She helped me understand these feeling responses and how to deal with them so that I would not be swayed into interventions that might be destructive to the patient." This anecdote illustrates the need to be in analysis and supervision when treating cases on the primitive edge, for both the analyst and the patient's protection. It also documents where Spotnitz's observations on contagion of feeling and his formulations on induced countertransference responses originated. Working with severe narcissistic disorders shaped Spotnitz's clinical philosophy, which the modern school upholds to this day. In the first issue of Modern Psychoanalysis, spring 1976, whose first paper is entitled The Origins of Modern Psychoanalysis, taken from the Spotnitz Meadow book, Treatment of a Narcissistic Neuroses, we read, "There are many theories about the human personality and its development, all of which may or may not be correct. What modern psychoanalysis tries to develop are theories that, when applied to the patient, help to cure him. Any theory that enables the analyst to understand the patient but becomes a detriment to curing him is discarded. In other words, modern psychoanalysis depends on and accepts only pragmatic concepts. It does not limit itself to psychodynamic treatment alone. Although the modern analyst cooperates with physicians who use physical and chemical methods with patients, he relies on psychodynamic communication to resolve transference resistances that interfere with healthy functioning." This statement clarifies the modern analytic position once and for all. Critics have pointed out that there is no modern analytic meta-theory. That is correct. Unlike most of the theoreticians who came in Freud's wake, who significantly changed or discarded Freud's meta-theory and did little or nothing to advance his clinical theory, Spotnitz went in an entirely different direction. He embraced Freud's theoretical conceptualizations because they provided an explanation for the functioning of the human mind and paved the way to understanding the psychodynamics of severe narcissism. So he used them to develop his clinical philosophy, his definition of the narcissistic defense, and his theory of technique. These were groundbreaking developments. Spotnitz had one major goal in mind: how to cure, how to be therapeutic. An opportunist in the best sense of the word, he was prepared to adopt whatever theories or concepts suited this purpose. He scoured the psychoanalytic and scientific literature regularly and took from it whatever he found useful. This lesson was not lost on Phyllis Meadow, who was in charge of guiding the center's curriculum. She introduced us to the work of Piontelli, Gadini, Edelman in neuroscience, Lacan, Green, and others, and today we are able to see her legacy reflected in Rory Rothman's work. Other critics have considered that performing research and clinical work simultaneously are antithetical and even counterproductive activities. Hyman Spotnitz in 1982 elucidated the problem in a note on psychoanalytic research. There is constructive research and destructive research. In destructive research, the analyst loses sight of the patient. The patient is forced into a state of regression because the analyst is preoccupied with research goals and fails to notice what is happening to him. He adds, the constructive researcher always keeps the therapeutic goals in mind. He considers what will benefit the patient, while at the same time considers what will add to the body of human knowledge.